For 5 centuries, history has painted El Dorado as the golden city, the ultimate prize in the brutal quest for wealth. They marched across the continent, sacrificing lives to find streets paved with gold and temples made of jade. They found nothing but mud, fever, and disappointment. The world concluded El Dorado was simply a cruel myth, a fever dream born from greed, amplified by the native tribes' cunning stories. But what if they were wrong? What if the gold was never the point? What if the civilization the explorers hunted for didn't vanish? It simply chose to disappear. Today, with technology that can peer beneath the densest jungle, we're uncovering evidence suggesting that El Dorado was more than a legend, it was a sophisticated urban system. The gold itself was just a bait. The real secret of El Dorado was not its wealth, but its sheer engineering ingenuity. We have been searching in the wrong place for the wrong thing. We must shift our focus from finding treasure to understanding the mechanism of disappearance. The Muisca people who inspired the legend never spoke of a golden city. They spoke of El Hombre Dorado, the Golden Man, a sacred ritual where the new chieftain would cover himself in gold dust and offer treasures to the gods in Lake Guatavita, a symbolic act of power and sacrifice. But for the Spanish, this ritual was twisted into the promise of a city, a permanent source of wealth waiting to be plundered, a devastating misinterpretation. The indigenous leaders knew what was coming. They witnessed the brutality of the conquistadors, driven mad by the hunger for gold. Their most valuable possessions were not in the lake, but carved into the very earth beneath their feet, a whole civilization ready to be buried by design. This is where the true engineering genius of the pre-Columbian cultures emerges. They engineer not for permanence, but for total erasure. Think of the Longyou grottos, the subterranean chambers carved into bedrock that defied belief. Now imagine that level of carving, but spread across the Amazon. What if the gold the Muisca possessed was not the metal, but the knowledge of geoengineering? The ability to turn stone and earth into a fortress. New data points to massive, intricate earthworks in the Llanos de Moxos region, not just villages, but sprawling urban centers connected by miles of perfectly straight roads and canals. Why weren't these obvious, monumental sites found decades ago? Because the builders used the jungle itself as their ultimate concealment method. The Spanish arrived, saw a thick, green, hostile wall vegetation, and assumed what they were looking for must lie beyond the jungle, not beneath it. But the deeper question remains, if they had the incredible resources to bury their own civilization, why did they do it? They weren't hiding from the conquistadors. They were hiding their knowledge. They were protecting a secret so profound it could not fall into the wrong hands. To understand this secret, we need to look beyond the Amazon jungle and into the dry, high-altitude air of the Andes Mountains, the source of Muisca power. Spanish chronicles describe Muisca gold working as far beyond European technology. They didn't just melt it, they were masters of tumbaga, an alloy of gold and copper, mixed in precise ratios that could be treated with plant acids to leach out the copper, leaving a pure but incredibly thin layer of surface gold. The Spanish were blinded by the surface shine. They saw tumbaga as merely a cheap imitation. They failed to grasp the chemistry and metallurgical mastery behind it. This mastery of alloys and chemical processes is the key. What if they applied the principles of tumbaga not to jewelry, but to their architecture? Imagine enormous structures built from local, low-value stone like the siltstone of Longyou, but then engineered to be chemically and physically resilient. Now, let's return to the Amazon. The vast, organized earthworks found by LiDAR were not built for display, but for structural stability, a massive load-bearing system. This was a civilization that didn't fear the jungle. They commanded it. They knew the precise rate of overgrowth, the flooding cycles, and the geological shifts. Their plan was simple and devastatingly effective. Let nature reclaim the surface, ensuring the Spanish would never know what lay beneath the endless green. The final, most crucial piece of evidence is the complete lack of historical records. The Spanish didn't just fail to find El Dorado, they failed to find any mention of it. Monumental construction projects on the scale of an entire city must leave records. The fact that they don't is proof that the erasure was absolute and organized. The Muisca didn't leave a trail of gold, they left a trail of silence, a deliberate historical black hole designed to protect their most vital assets, their people and their knowledge. What if the Longyu grottos weren't a quarry, but a test site, a prototype for an enormous subterranean ark, hidden in plain sight? The final, most terrifying question. If a civilization mastered the ability to erase its own existence, what were they trying to protect that was so valuable? It was not gold. Gold can be melted. It was knowledge that allowed them to live in harmony with the most powerful force on Earth, time itself. The Muisca understood the cycles of history. They knew that human greed, like a jungle vine, would always attempt to choke and consume. So they left a distraction, the promise of gold, a glittering illusion to satisfy the invaders while the truth settled safely beneath the earth. El Dorado was not a city, but a multi-generational escape plan, a self-destruct mechanism that kicked in the moment the Spanish ships touched the shore. Think about it. A civilization advanced enough to map and modify its entire landscape simply vanished. The real mystery isn't where they went, but how they did it so cleanly. And as modern science peels back the green curtain of the Amazon, we are left staring at the undeniable truth. El Dorado was protected by a genius that we still, 5 centuries later, cannot explain. To fully appreciate this ingenuity, we must analyze the stone itself. The Andean highlands are rich in a specific type of limestone and volcanic rock. Geologists now believe these ancient builders knew how to exploit the rock's natural porosity, creating materials that could be rapidly eroded or hardened on command. This wasn't primitive quarry work. It was the ultimate form of biomimicry. They designed their city to decay exactly like the jungle it was hiding under. The Muisca used specific cultivated strains of moss and fungi, perhaps genetically modified, that could rapidly colonize the prepared stone, accelerating its disintegration. This is the anti-pyramid. Instead of building monuments to last forever, they built a civilization designed to become an ephemeral part of the environment. The Spaniards kept searching for the stone structures of the Aztecs, or the temples of the Inca. They never looked for the subtle mounds that were the temples. But LiDAR has exposed their brilliance. The earthworks are not random hills. They are meticulously planned causeways and platforms, creating a hydraulic system of epic proportions. This system allowed the Muisca to not only survive the cyclical floods of the Amazon basin, but to control them, ensuring fresh water and fertile land year-round. This advanced infrastructure was their true treasure, not the gold they threw into the lake, but the system that guaranteed their survival for generations. The great Spanish mistake was applying a European value system to a South American civilization. They only saw the shimmer of gold. They ignored the miracle of water management. This is a story not of a city destroyed, but of a city preserved through the ultimate act of self-sacrifice, giving up its visible identity to survive. The real El Dorado is a time capsule, waiting for an era when humanity is wise enough to appreciate knowledge over mere material wealth. When the Spanish left, they declared the city a phantom. They recorded their failure, not the success of the Muisca to outwit them completely. But the earth still holds the secret. Every LiDAR scan that reveals a geometric pattern is a direct message from a culture that refused to be conquered. The challenge now belongs to us. Can we read the geological language they left behind? Can we separate the gold illusion from the truth of their science? Scientists are quietly unearthing Muisca knowledge of metallurgy and soil modification that points to something far more complex than simple farming. This black earth is an artificial soil, created by the ancient Amazonians to be permanently fertile, a secret of sustainable agriculture lost for centuries. What if the Muisca's plan wasn't just to hide their city, but to see the entire continent with their superior knowledge of sustaining life? The conquistadors searched for gold they could hold in their hands. The Muisca offered them something they could never grasp, the key to eternal, self-renewing civilization. And if El Dorado is truly a sealed vault of technology, hidden beneath the earth, waiting for the right moment, then we might be nearing that moment of its dramatic reappearance. If El Dorado was built to be buried, it suggests a profound understanding of pressure, erosion, and seismic activity geological knowledge centuries ahead of its time. The sheer precision required to carve massive chambers without collapse, as seen in the Longyu grottos, demands a mastery of resonant frequency. Could the Muisca have used sound or low-frequency vibrations to loosen and remove the massive volume of rock needed to bury their city? The 1 million cubic meters of stone missing from the Longyu grottos has never been found. The theory of acoustic pulverization offers a chilling answer. If the Muisca possessed a similar technology, they could have turned their entire city's construction material back into the earth, pulverizing it into the terra preta soil. The most perfect disguise is one that serves a dual purpose. They didn't just hide their city. They left a legacy of sustainable agriculture to their descendants. But the conquistadors weren't the only threat. The very act of sealing the city introduced a new danger: the jungle's relentless pressure. The ancient engineers had to account for centuries of root growth, ground moisture, and the shifting weight of the Amazon itself pressing down on their buried vault. The structures that LiDAR is revealing the perfect circles. The massive causeways were not just roads. They were stress distribution anchors. They used the earth itself as a counterweight, ensuring that the ground around the central vault remained stable, no matter the flood, the drought, or the tremor. For centuries, we mistook these engineered earthworks for simple fortifications or ceremonial sites. They were, in fact, living mechanical components. But the greatest fear of the Muisca wasn't that the Spanish would find their secret, but that they would corrupt it and misuse the knowledge. Imagine the Spanish having access to a technology that could pulverize rock or chemically erode entire fortresses. The global power balance would have been instantly shattered. This confirms the intentional abandonment theory. The Muisca chose to disappear not out of weakness, but out of a position of immense power and moral obligation. Now, the focus shifts to modern times. Are there any known anomalies, inexplicable events that suggest a system buried for centuries is beginning to wake up? Reports of localized seismic events, not tied to any known fault lines, have been recorded in the Llanos de Moxos region, the exact location of the major earthworks. Are these tremors natural, or are they the sound of ancient mechanical components, underground, adjusting to centuries of pressure, or perhaps testing a system? The true purpose of El Dorado might not have been merely a hiding place, but a dormant energy reservoir built to power the next phase of their civilization. Could the Muisca have understood and harnessed the Earth's natural magnetic field or geothermal energy on a colossal scale? If so, El Dorado is not a treasure chest of gold, but the planet's largest ancient power plant, waiting for the moment to reconnect with its descendants. To conceal a city, one must first conceal the waste. The millions of cubic meters of excavated rock must have gone somewhere, or, more accurately, must have been transformed. This process suggests not just an understanding of chemistry, but of material science on a nanoscale. They weaponized geology to protect their civilization. The Muisca belief system often centered on the concept of cyclical time and renewal. They accepted that what goes down must eventually come back up. The burial was simply a long sleep. The entire city was put into a kind of structural stasis, waiting for a key event or a specific celestial alignment to trigger its emergence. The gold that the Spanish hunted for was a symbolic offering of thanks to the gods for preserving their wisdom and guaranteeing their eventual return. In this context, the Muisca were the most successful civilization in history. They achieved total conscious separation from external threats. But what if the process of decay is reaching its engineered limit? What if the jungle's natural pressure is finally beginning to compromise the subterranean anchors? This compromised integrity would force the ancient systems to compensate, perhaps explaining the random, localized seismic events reported by modern research teams. It is not a failure, but an engineered reinitialization. The structure is shifting, pushing the land to maintain its stability, preparing for its next phase. The final message of El Dorado is a warning to those who will destroy the world for wealth. The greatest power does not lie in gold, but in the ability to choose silence. The Muisca walked away and took their priceless wisdom with them, preserving a future that might otherwise have been annihilated by greed. Their legacy is not the lost city, but the fertile soil that still feeds the region and the knowledge of self-preservation that is woven into the landscape. But the return is inevitable. The engineered systems were designed to endure, but not indefinitely. A final trigger is approaching. We must ask, what happens when the hidden power plant is fully charged? Will it simply emerge, or will it communicate with the world? The Langyu caves were flooded. Was that flood a final act of concealment, or an ingenious method of preserving the structural integrity and preventing detection? The water acted as a perfect insulator against the chaotic, destructive forces of the surface world, ensuring the knowledge remained pristine for millennia. If the Muisca used a similar liquid preservation method in El Dorado, it means the city is not just buried, it is actively suspended and protected. The bottomless ponds that led to the discovery of Langyu were not pools of water, but rather the access shafts to this preservation system. If El Dorado has similar shafts, they are cleverly disguised by the very nature the Muisca engineered the earthworks and canals of the Llanos de Moxos. And the most chilling thought, what if the system has already completed its reinitialization? What if they are simply waiting for a sign that the world is ready? The ancient Muisca likely designed a fail-safe, a final test to gauge the moral readiness of the surface world before unveiling their ultimate knowledge. The gold objects found in Lake Guadavita were never meant to be found. They were the bait, the first test. Would humanity be consumed by greed or respect the sacred ritual? The very act of draining Lake Guadavita, a destructive and greedy action, confirmed the Muisca's suspicions. The surface world was not yet ready for their secrets. But decades of quiet, respectful, scientific inquiry, LiDAR, geological monitoring, carbon dating may finally be the correct signal the ancient intelligence was waiting for. The city doesn't need to physically rise. The power system simply needs to establish contact with a mind that understands its language, mathematics, and engineering. And the sign may have already been sent. Reports of unexplained power outages and localized electrical anomalies near the Llanos de Moxos have increased in recent years. Is this simply infrastructure failure, or is the ancient power grid, El Dorado, attempting to synchronize with our modern electrical frequency? If the Muisca's plan was truly a long sleep, their descendants are the key to its awakening. They hold the bloodline connection to the system's activation codes. For 5 centuries, the world saw a blank spot on the map, but a handful of indigenous families preserved the oral tradition, the memory of the sleeping giant beneath their fields. The story of El Dorado is not about searching for gold. It is about understanding that the richest treasure is the one that is deliberately protected, removed from the clutches of human greed. If El Dorado's power grid is stabilizing and seeking synchronization, it means a window is opening a chance for humanity to engage with an ancient, superior intelligence. But the question isn't whether we can talk to El Dorado, but what we will do with the wisdom it holds. Will we repeat the mistakes of the conquistadors? Or will we finally see past the shimmer of gold and embrace the true treasure? The knowledge of sustainable life, self-preservation, and ultimate architectural genius. El Dorado is no longer a historical mystery. It is a test of our future, a challenge sent across 5 centuries of silence, waiting for our answer. And that silence is starting to break. Keep watching, because the deeper truth is always closer than you think, waiting for the right moment to be uncovered.